handout and then a little sheet to kind of take some notes and ask questions. Usually when I'm doing a training, if someone has a question, we'll pause in between. But because we have a lot to cover, as you can tell from the handout, I'm going to ask that you save your questions to the end, okay? So write them down here, or any thoughts that come up that you might want to speak to me about afterwards, put them on your note sheet. So I think most of you that are in here kind of know who I am, but a few of you, I see about 3 or 4, maybe 5 new faces. That being said, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction about myself. My name is Nikki Watkins, and I always kind of put a lot of information in regard to my background. One, because it helps you understand where I'm coming from in terms of my educational and experience, but also because it gives you a good idea as to why I'm doing this work. To me, the 2 most important things on this slide is the fact that my personal mission statement is to be a light, brightly illuminating truth and gifting love. That comes from my belief in Christ. And then the last one here is all the roles that I wear, because we all wear many hats, right? So I'm a mother, daughter, sister, aunt, cousin, neighbor, friend, lover of people, involved and concerned citizen. I'm a human being like all of us, but for the purpose of this workshop today, I'm also a nonprofit founder and a small business owner. I started my first nonprofit back in 1997. We will be celebrating 27 years this year, which is huge. Yeah, that's a good thing. Thank you. Most people say, well, why aren't you there doing that work? Well, most of us know about United Way, right? We've heard of United Way. Can any of you tell me who the founders of United Way are? Not a one. Because most people don't realize that nonprofits aren't owned by the person that found them. Unlike small businesses or any business, nonprofits are technically owned by the community. The board of directors are simply just the fiduciary agents for that nonprofit, so they don't own it, but it's passed on. The purpose of a nonprofit is to really benefit the community for the long term. So you want to have a United Way, or your nonprofits end up like United Way, where people don't know your name, but they know your work. And so when I talk about being a nonprofit founder, even though the mission of that organization, Peace Learning Center, is still near and dear to my heart, obviously I've moved on to do other work, but the work is still being done. Also, I have an extensive background in a lot of areas that are related to what we're going to discuss today. In order to become an expert, I don't know if any of you have read Earl Wood's book, written about 30 years ago, 20 years ago now. But so many others have since then been able to prove scientifically to be an expert, you really only need 10,000 hours in an area. So I've got 10,000 plus hours in all of these different areas. Obviously, having a law degree kind of helped make that happen. But my first educational background was actually in social work. So I was in social work and education before I even touched law, but of course I've been able to expound upon that. So now that you have a little bit about me, let me ask you, are you in the right place in this training? In order to know whether or not you're in the right place, I have 5 questions that I want you to take a second to think about for yourself. If you look at your handout, at the very bottom, second box you'll see here, there's 5 questions. So if you can just take a minute and check these off. Check either yes or no for each question. Does more than half of the community actually know you exist? That would be the 51% or more rule. And when I say you, I'm referring to your nonprofit. Have every one of your board members donated or fundraised for your organization within the past 6 months? Has every one of your board members attended at least 50% of the board meetings and at least 50% of the activities or events that your organization held? And it's not an or, that's an and. That means, are they coming to at least more than half of the meetings and coming to at least half of your events? The next question, are all of your organization's core 5 to 7 positions filled? Now this comes up as a question oftentimes because sometimes people are like, well, I'm not sure what the core positions are. And so I just want to real quick touch upon, when I say core positions, there's 5 positions that you have to have for a nonprofit to actually be in compliance with the state of Florida. The first one obviously is your governing board has to be made up of at least 3 board members minimum. I always encourage nonprofits that I assist to start with at least 5, because if something happens with just one of them, you're automatically out of compliance, right? If you have 5, it gives you some backup, but it also gives you different individuals to go to for different needs that the organization will have. If you just have 3, and if you say, okay, but I can only start with 3, what 3 areas should I pull from? 3 or more, you should always make sure you have someone that is well versed in governance. That means that they understand Robert's Rules of Order. That's probably going to be your board chair, and that's probably going to be the person who keeps things in line and running smoothly. As the executive director, as some of you all are, you won't have time to try to babysit your board and make sure your organization's operations and day-to-day is functioning well. And so with that being said, if you have someone that's well versed in governance or is comfortable with learning that, getting the Robert's Rules of Order booklet, when I work with nonprofits, I always provide them with a cheat sheet, which I can show you, that kind of helps with that Robert's Rules of Order. I'll pull that out when I start talking about the board, so you can just kind of see what it does. Is it helps your board function smoothly so that those responsibilities come off of you. You got to have someone that is well versed in legal and financial oversight. It can be the same person, but usually it is not. People always assume that attorneys know about numbers. Most of us went to law school because we don't like numbers. We didn't want to do math, so we went to law school. Usually it's the smart kids who either know math or are big on history and reading. The math and science folks go to become doctors. The reading and history folks go to become lawyers. That's kind of how the breakdown works. And so if you don't have someone that is comfortable with both, or at least can refer out for one or the other, then try to fill those 2. And last but not least, if you have the ability to add another person. Now the first 3 I mentioned, those are the basic requirements. Then add someone that is able to recruit and support your executive director. This person does not have to have an extensive background in nonprofit management or anything really dealing with a nonprofit. What they have to have is a comfortable relationship with you, that you can call them at 10 o'clock at night and say, hey, we got to get this done for this event. Or you can call them last minute and say, we got 3 or 4 days left. I need you to kind of help me recruit more people for this particular event, or volunteers. That person should really be your right-hand man or woman, okay? So those make up 4 right there on the board. But remember, 3 of those 4, the first 3, governance, legal, and finance, are your absolute requirements. The next position that you have to have for those basic 5 would be your executive director. Someone has to run the organization and the day-to-day operations, and it cannot be the person that's in charge for the board. Remember, your board's role is fiduciary, so you want to make sure you have someone separate for that. Then you have to have a minimum of 1 program staff person, okay? So those round out your 5, your executive director, your program staff, and your 3 board members. If you have them in the state of Florida, you can at least be in operation, all right? But I always say 7, not the 5. The additional 2 would be your administrative or your operations person, someone that's answering the phone calls, someone that's following up with the emails, someone that's taking care of your day-to-day administrative tasks that as an executive director, you may not have time to tend to. And lastly, if you have at least 15 employees under IRS standards, you have to have someone that is able to keep your books and your personnel matters in order. That would be your HR professional or someone related to that function, doing HR types of activities. To me, that is a requirement right off the top if you're going to have your 5 people, because you need somebody to kind of help. And you can contract out. That doesn't have to be an actual employee. But if you have 15 minimum, 15 is the threshold for the IRS to make sure that someone is managing those tasks, okay? And it might be you wearing 2 hats, but that is a specific role. I want to mention a couple other roles that I think are really important to have, but that can be contracted out, that you do not have to have on staff, but be mindful of. One is your strategic planning and implementation person. That's what we do at Hopewell Global. We provide a lot of that support for organizations that can't afford to have that on the staff for regular. You call us when you need us. There are lots of them out there. Advocacy and fundraising is usually done by someone on your board, but if you don't have someone on your board that is dedicated to that, then again, there are many colleges and universities that will support that effort. And then it's free. You don't even have to contract out. A development and fundraising person, that typically falls on the executive director, but that doesn't mean that you have to do it by yourself. There are resources to support that. And then your communication staff. These are your people who typically handle your social media, your website development, all of that all falls under communication. Again, those are often contracted. It's important for me to note also that volunteers often help nonprofits work. And although they are not considered an absolute required position, that is a position that still needs a job description so that they're aware of what you're expecting of them. And many of them do it for either hours or credits for school. And so in that case, you have to have records. And so if you don't have someone managing them, make sure you allocate time for you as the executive director to do so. All right, any questions about those 5 to 7 that I mentioned? Because that is on that handout that I passed. No? All right, so then the last one is, do you have a strategic plan that includes fundraising and marketing? Fundraising and marketing are literally going to be your bread and butter. If you don't have money as a nonprofit, you don't have a nonprofit operation because you don't have the money to actually get out and do it unless you're not paying yourself. And if you're not marketing it, how are you getting your fellow community members to come and actually be served by your nonprofit? So those two are bread and butter items there. And I think, yes, I did mention here for the 5 to 7 positions. All right, let's go to the next one. So I just want to real quick mention, today's objective is for you to first explore some key funding strategies and grant opportunities, which we're going to jump right into first, starting with the money. Then we're going to talk a little bit about best practices regarding board development, because that's going to keep you operational and sustained as an organization. And then we'll talk a little bit about strategic planning, particularly in today's climate where we have an administration that hasn't exactly been kind to the nonprofit community. And so we have to make some adjustments and pivots, of course. And I want to kind of guide you in doing that. And then we'll finish with an engaging exercise so that you get a chance to kind of network with each other. I say that to the end, so as people funnel in, you'll actually have someone to network with, and you'll be able to make partnerships that hopefully lead to collaborative activity. All right? Let's jump into the money. So first and foremost, diversifying the funding stream. Put my little cheat sheet here. So I want to talk a little bit about different funding streams for your nonprofit, and this is where you might want to take some notes. So these are the basic 7 categories of funding streams for nonprofits. You have your donations and giving campaigns, where basically people are just giving to you. This is also in your handout at the top where it talks about, there's a little activity that I'll refer to where you kind of identify what you're using and what you aren't. Then you have your grants, public and private, as well as government grants where someone is funding you. Many of them come with strings attached, is what we often call them in the industry, which they come with deliverables or expectations that you will deliver something as a result of them giving you those funds or finances. Then you have your corporate sponsorships, which can include small businesses. People often forget about that. Alrighty. Then fourth, we have fees. This is another one that people often forget about. You can charge membership fees, you can charge service fees. Oftentimes people say, well, I'm a nonprofit, I'm not supposed to make money. The money is not going to you directly. The money is going to the nonprofit to make sure that the activities are occurring. Sales is another one that people often don't think about, and so I'm going to spend a minute or two actually talking about that, because I'm hoping that as a result of this workshop, each and every one of you will come up with something that you can sell that will generate an additional source of revenue, stream of revenue for your organization. Then you have government write-off for giving a donation to charity. That's got to be handled differently. Crowdfunding is a little different because a lot of them use online platforms. Sometimes they come with a cost. And last but not least, one that most people don't think about until they're 10 plus years into being an agency is your investments or your endowments. And they're one and the same because an endowment essentially is an investment. You're making interest off of money that was put in. So I want to spend a little time talking about these. This is where people have a lot of questions. When we start with the first one, I kind of call that individual contributions because they're one-time gifts or sometimes reoccurring gifts that people are giving. They can be small amounts, they can be large contributions. The best way to make sure that you're going to have a funnel or a stream of donations is to allow people to set up automatic deposits to your nonprofit. And it's very easy to do. Go to your bank, let them know that you want to be able to receive nonprofit donations for your organization directly from someone's paycheck account Okay, so when someone gets paid, you give them a form that your bank will give you, and they will fill it out, get it back to you, and that gives your bank permission to automatically, when they get that paycheck, that direct deposit, a portion of it will hit your nonprofit account. So it's a way for people to give and support your organization. And even if it's $5 a week or $10 a week, imagine if someone says, I can give you $10 a week out of my paycheck. There's 52 weeks in a year. That means they just agreed to donate $520 to your organization annually. If you can get 10 of those, you have a donation of $5,200 that you can automatically expect to show up in your account on a regular basis, okay? That's one that people often overlook. And if you think about it, if you had those reoccurring donations coming in, that could actually total an amount that's higher than a one-time lump sum. You might have someone give you a check for $5,000, but if you have 10 people giving you $520, that's $5,200. That's more than that one time. And depending on how you grow that base of individuals, maybe someone says, I'll give you 20 a week, I'll give you 50 a month. That far exceeds those big lump sums that you thought you had to chase after. Now, you're just cultivating the community that you already serve. People that you've served that enjoyed your services, they may say, well, I'll give back. Since you helped me, I want to help someone else. That is actually how President Obama won his campaign, on the $5 and $10 donations that were coming in regularly, okay? So now people are paying more attention in the political arena, at least, to the small givers. But that wasn't really a big thing until President Obama's first campaign. Now we know a lot of the small dollars, like small businesses, can generate more income sometimes than the lump sum large corporations that end up being kind of welfare corporations. They're, bankrolled by the government versus what we call the little man, who's actually funding big efforts. All right, fundraising campaigns are like when you have events like Give Miami Day, which is big here. Those events leverage the resources of matched dollars. That falls into the giving campaign category, and it typically takes place at the end of the year. There is a cycle that I'll talk about later in terms of when should you be giving or setting up campaigns. It's tied more to your board, because that is a function typically of your board to do your fundraising for you. And then I'll talk about the membership fees when we get down there. There is an element to membership fees, though, that can be connected to individual contributions, because if you have someone that says, I'll give $10 every week, and their company does a match, that to be a part of that, you may charge a service fee to the company for contributing to that, which would basically cover your expenses that the bank may charge you for generating something like that. So they cover the expense, as well as making sure that you're getting those match dollars from the company and the individual donor. All right, I'm going to turn to grants. There's basically two kinds, because you see public/government kind of goes together, but your private and public foundations, the foundations that you have are basically going to be, they can be small or large, giving one-time or renewal funds to make sure that you can do certain activities. The thing about grants that's a little tricky, people don't often realize they come with, like I mentioned before, strings or deliverable requirements. That means if you write the grant, you're agreeing to do certain things as a result. Oftentimes, it's just reporting on the delivery, reporting how many people did you serve, what was the impact. But for an organization that is small, it may be difficult to capture that. So what you want to do is have a system in place that allows you to figure out up front, so that you're not scrambling at the end to give the deliverables, which is essentially going to be your impact statement. Who did you reach? How do we know it actually made a difference, okay? These are all of your evaluative activities. All that's going to fall under these grant requirements. And it's true for private, public, and government. Then you have your local foundations. Now, local foundations tend to provide more operational dollars, or dollars without deliverables. They're not as plentiful as some of your larger foundation dollars or your national foundation dollars. However, they understand the need for for nonprofits and small businesses. There's many grants for small businesses as well. But for nonprofits, they understand the need for you all to have operational dollars, or dollars that don't have any requirements connected to them. Because as a nonprofit, just like any business, you have expenses that come up. Perhaps you're renting a building that has a plumbing issue, and the landlord says, you pay it, we'll reimburse you. Where's that money gonna come from? If everything is tied to a grant that says you can only use those dollars for your programs, then you have to come up with that either from your board or out of the executive director's pocket, which can become expensive. I gave the example of a facilities issue like plumbing, but more likely to occur would be something like your supplies that you need that aren't necessarily covered. If you have specific technology or equipment that aren't covered under the grant, all of those operational types of expenses, your personnel, your salaries, all that's going to be typically covered under more of an operational and not a programs grant that is as plentiful. But they're there, they exist. Then you have your government grants. There's federal, state, and local. For your federal, now we used to go to grants.gov. I'll give you an update when we talk about trying to navigate in today's time, because grants.gov has kind of been hijacked by our DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. They have kind of done some things different with grants.gov. So I would tell people you can kind of look at it, but steer clear of being completely dependent upon that at the moment. I would look more to a local when it comes to government grants, like your county or your city. I would not consider a state grant to be local right now. Unfortunately, many state funds are pass-through funds, meaning they come from the federal government, just like what you would find in grants.gov, and they are funneled down to the state. So even though they're considered state dollars, technically they are federal funds. So if the federal funds get frozen, what happens to your state funds? They're frozen also. So that's why I said, even though they're separate entities, consider those funds one and the same for the purpose of the funding stream. All right, let's look at the corporate sponsorships. Corporate support, there's two different kinds. You have your corporate giving programs where businesses can contribute, like I said, the matching gifts up front, the donations that actual organizations, businesses give directly to nonprofits. But you can also have sponsorships. So sponsorships are more widely used for events or campaigns, right? So let's say, for instance, Costco says, we're going to fund your backpack drive by donating 100 backpacks to your organization, okay? That would be an example of them sponsoring something for your event. So they would be listed as the sponsor. And in return, they get brand exposure, brand recognition, right? That they're doing some good in the community as well. Sponsorship is all about goodwill. If you are really interested in securing more corporate sponsorships, I want you to write that word down, goodwill. Because when you make your ask, that is what they're looking to do. So whenever you ask or you're seeking anything, you want to know your audience, right? You want to figure out what's the best way that I can get them to contribute, to donate, to give. Use the buzzwords that align with their goals and their operational expectations. For sponsorships, it's all about goodwill. How can they do good in the community? How can their brand appeal to those shoppers that come in to their organization? Let's see here. I'm going to talk a little bit about these fees, membership services, etc., starting with earned income and revenue streams. So you can actually charge for programs as nonprofits, which is another big question that I get. I'm a nonprofit, I'm not supposed to charge, but you actually can charge. You can charge for services such as, for those who are interested in this, I'm going to say them slow so you can write them down. Training, workshops, consulting. If you're doing one of those three things as a nonprofit organization, you can actually charge the community for those services. And that would contribute, those fees will contribute to your bottom line directly. Because as soon as those are paid, those are funds that are unrestricted. Unrestricted means no deliverables, you don't have to answer to anybody that comes in. You can use that for salaries, you can use that to go to my first example of fix the plumbing. Whatever that plumbing, quote unquote, is. It could be fixing, how your systems are established. Maybe you have a website issue. Whatever your needs are, those can actually go to those needs. Also, your events and fundraising. Sometimes there's membership or service fees. Eventbrite charges a service fee. If you actually have people registered through Eventbrite, you have to pay a fee. There's a percentage attached to every person. Even if it's free, there's still a small fee. And so you can pass those fees off when you put together events. You can have a line item under administrative costs for that. Also, license plates. We know in Florida there's a state license plate. Some nonprofits have the benefit. It takes a while to actually get that going. You almost have to have someone lobbying for you in Tallahassee because that's where that decision is made. But again, it's not out of reach. I do work with Sheridan House Ministries, and when they got their license plate, they were still a very small nonprofit, and they just kept their Christian ministry, and so they just kept praying about it and trying to see who they could connect to. They serve single moms. They were able to, with their goodwill letter, reach someone who's a single mom in the legislature who had a heart for a ministry that serves single moms. And that's how they were able to get their license plate. So that's why I mentioned that goodwill, but don't count yourself out for different fundraising opportunities. And then of course you have your in-kind donations. Now, in-kind donations are whenever you accept goods or services in lieu of cash. The person says, I can't give you $500, but I can give you 500 hours. Or I can't give you $50, but I can give you 50 hours. And you say 500 hours? Well, if they send you 10 students from Barry University and all of them have to get 50 hours of community service, they just gave you 500 hours of service. Can you use 500 hours of someone helping you do this? Maybe your nonprofit is tutoring. So maybe you have them for one semester during the year, one of your students has them as a tutor that you don't have to pay, right? So you're thinking creatively out of the box and using in-kind donations to actually advance your mission. There are 3 other types of in-kind donations that, again, people often overlook. They are technology. There are like TechSoup, for instance. You can write that down. If you Google TechSoup, they provide lots of different resources and lots of different software packages for free or for minimal costs, such as $5. So you can get the entire Word. If you need Word for your computer, let's say you're getting to an old version and it's time to get a new one, you can go to TechSoup as a nonprofit, and that is strictly for nonprofits. And you can get the entire suite. That's your Excel, that's your Word, that's your everything that's included for $5. So take advantage of those. It is still an in-kind because even though you're paying $5, it's valued at much more. So let's say the value is $300. Minus that $5 that you paid, you're going to give them an in-kind tax write-off form for $295. That's the in-kind portion. And you can also write that off on your taxes. And they write their portion off and you write the $5 that you paid off. All right, equipment is another one. I told you there were 3. So the first one was technology. The second one is equipment. A lot of times people will just donate. Maybe something is, they've purchased all new computers. There's nothing wrong with the old ones. They donate 20 computers to you. You get to write that off, whatever the cost of negotiating that, and they get to write off that as a full donation. You have to give them a letter or some documentation to demonstrate the in-kind amount. So you would estimate how much is each computer, multiply that by the number of computers that they donated to you, and that bottom line is what they get to write off for taxes. And whatever costs were involved for you in getting that to you, maybe you had to pay someone to load them up, to bring them in, to set them up, all of that becomes a write-off for you, tied to that one in-kind donation, okay? And then the last one is professional expertise. This is how board members get paid. So you can give an honorarium to a board member that comes in. Let's say, for instance, remember we talked about one of the ways you can charge for services is a training. Let's say if you have a board member that's very well versed in giving a certain type of training that is related to what you do in your nonprofit. Well, you can then give that person an honorarium for their service in doing the training, and those participants who paid to attend the training, that money can go between the honorarium and whatever costs your organization will benefit their revenue or their bottom line, your bottom line, okay? Alrighty, so those are the primary ones that I have here, but I wanted to spend a little time on these others. Starting with we kind of talked about special events and in-kind, so I'm going to start with the crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is basically platforms like GoFundMe or Kickstarter, okay? They do have a cost involved, as you all know. It's usually for specific time-sensitive needs that come up that your nonprofit may have. We often hear about GoFundMe when there's a funeral, or Kickstarter when somebody has a new small business thing, idea that they want to start, but they can also be used for nonprofits. And so when you talk about crowdfunding, just be aware of reading the small print. It has to be listed there legally, so there's no hidden agenda. You go on, you read all the fine print. If you have questions, you call someone that you can, that'll help you, or you go to your chat GPT, or you Google it, and you move forward. But just be aware that there are some tax implications. And then for investments and endowments, I wanted to spend just a moment on this, because endowments endowments offer long-term financial stability through investment income. There's 3 kinds. Let me see where I am on time. Okay, we're doing great. There's 3 types of endowments. You have your permanent endowment, which means your principal stays the same, but your interest gets spent. So let's say you've set up an endowment for, I'm going to use round easy numbers, $100,000, all right? Let's say you've been around as a nonprofit now for 10 years, and you were able to slowly but surely amass $100,000. You go to the bank and say, we want to establish an endowment. Basically, they're going to take that $100,000 and invest it in the market. That $100,000 never changes. They're investing a small portion of that. And then in 5 years, they'll say, okay, or 10 years, let's just, again, I want to keep it easy. In 10 years, they'll say, you are now allowed to take whatever interest you make on that $10,000 that you made that's set aside from that 100, take that out and you'll get a check every year, all right? Now, most notable endowments are attached to large universities like, we know Harvard's been in the news, or Columbia, et cetera. However, many very successful nonprofits, even your United Way Miami, here in Miami, South Florida, use endowments to actually fund 4, 5, 6 different high-level positions. Because if you grow your endowment over time, whatever that interest comes down, if that interest starts to be something like, you know, it gets to $1 million in 30, 40 years, and now that interest is bringing in, you know, $200,000 or $100,000 worth of money coming in, maybe you're doing well on the market. Remember, it's tied to the market. You never lose that initial investment. So going back to my example, if you started with $100,000, that $100,000 is always there until you close that endowment. The thing about an endowment is, if you close it, you cannot reopen it that way. That's not kind of how they don't work that way. And so you want to keep that going, but you know you always have that additional cushion. So if you have to close down and have wind-up activities and there's expenses, unfortunately, kind of like a business close, at least you have all those expenses covered from the established endowment. So I always tell nonprofits, if you're early, don't worry about, you know, having to do that right away, but keep a little something aside that maybe when you hit your 10-year mark, when people say, oh, we want to celebrate a 10-year anniversary, how do you want to celebrate? I would say celebrate by asking people to contribute to an endowment campaign. Because once you hit that 10-year mark, your expenses start growing, you want to put that cushion aside. And again, you're only going to get, if you do a permanent one, you're only going to be able to build off of the interest and not lose. It's a win-win. A term endowment is where the principal can be spent after a certain amount of time. So let's say, for instance, this term endowment is set for 10 years. You set it up at $100,000, whatever interest you make during that time, you will get that over those 10 years. And then once that 10-year term ends, they'll give you that $100,000 back. And then you have to start a new endowment. And that's a great way to start if you are at your 10-year mark and you're not wanting to look long haul. Maybe things are a little shaky right now. You may do a term versus a permanent. And then your last but not least, created by the nonprofit board, is where your principal can be assessed if needed, okay? And that's your quasi-endowment. It's basically an account setup where it can fall into an endowment if there's no expenses needed over a certain amount of time. But if you have a need to use that money, you can pull out without penalty, okay? But they're all connected to the market. Now, the last one that I said I would spend some time on that I'm going to go back up to is your sales, because I already mentioned for your contracts that they're a little different than grants, but I'll close out with that one. I do want to spend a minute on sales because this is an area that many nonprofits, again, miss out on. Don't confuse sales with charging service fees for like trainings and workshops like I mentioned. Sales are basically when you are selling something for profit, although you're a nonprofit, because that profit is directly going to your bottom line as a nonprofit. So here's an example I always give people. They say, well, I don't know what to sell. Are you the type of nonprofit that's interesting enough that you could fill a book with some pictures and some, you know, little things about how this benefits people in the community? Well, maybe I could. Well, if you get a couple of students who are working on their PhDs, who have to do something anyway to prove that they know what they're talking about, that's related to what your nonprofit is about, have them work on some type of coffee table book that can then be published. They get some notoriety, their name is out there, they can add that to their, perhaps even their dissertation, or when they get out into the community after they've submitted their dissertation and say, hey, there's a book that I've worked on. You have your coffee table book, and now you can put that in every single museum store throughout the state. The humanities department for the state always gives grants to help small businesses and nonprofits sell things in different museums. And then you take that money, you fund the cost of the publishing and the printing, you put that in the store. Every time that book sells, that's a sale that goes right to your bottom line. See how that works? Now, there are hundreds of museums throughout the state of Florida, right? Let's just say, we know that there are way more than 100, but let's just say for the ease of understanding how this works, we're only gonna say, if there were only 100 museums in the state of Florida that sold your book, your coffee table book, your book, most of the tourists are buying the books, anywhere from these museums. That book is on sale for $30, all right? If you sell 3 books a week, just 3, $90 times 100 museums, how much money have you made? $9,000 a week. Is that worth doing what it takes to get that college student to help you put that book together and sell that, go after that humanities grant so that you can put that coffee table book in the stores and generate that revenue for your nonprofit? Absolutely. And the same goes for t-shirts. People who are family members of children, they love to buy things that their kids make. They put little hands on the shirt. Oh, and if you put names on anything, you definitely have a big sale, right? Because all the parents come whenever your kids perform, right? So if that performance is tied to something that the nonprofit's doing, the nonprofit sponsors put their names on the shirt, the kids' names on the shirt, you're gonna have multiple people in their family buying that shirt. And all those sales generate your nonprofit expenses or go towards your revenue as a nonprofit. So really think about selling. Now, I will tell you there are some IRS things to be aware of, some tax implications. If what you're selling is not related to your nonprofit and it exceeds $1,000 in sales annually, then you have to file, write this down, Form 990T, okay? Because that tells the IRS that we've brought more than $1,000 in sales unrelated to benefit the organization. If you get to about $10,000, it's gonna send a red flag because they're gonna say, are you a nonprofit or a for-profit? Because you're selling something that's not related. The kicker is to make sure it's related, that's all. Make sure it connects to what you're doing, and that's what's gonna generate more sales anyway. Now, if your taxes owed off of what you sell are more than $500, then you're also gonna have to fill out a special IRS form for those categories. So that's something also to be aware of. But it's just reporting, no different than the 990 reporting anyway. And it's also reported on the 990, it goes with that form. So you're not really doing anything special, just remembering to note it if you've made more than 500. But if it's related, there are no real tax implications besides just reporting that we're generating funding by selling something related to what we're doing. All right, so there's 3 reasons why I really want you all to really think about coming up with selling something branded with your nonprofit's logo, okay? I really want you all to really think about when you have your one-on-one time in your small groups, something that you can sell, regardless if it's a hat, if it's t-shirts, whatever it is that you come up with. The first thing is, it's a year-round revenue generator, okay? It creates a new stream that you don't have to rely on donations or grants for. Number 2, it increases your brand visibility. That's why I say it's something that you can put your name on, okay? So it helps you share your message and attract more supporters, more donors. And then lastly, it's a supporter engagement. It gives volunteers, donors, and board members a tangible way to show that they support you as well. I can't come to all the different board meetings. I'm gonna have to step down for the board. But guess what? When you send out those t-shirts, I'll get 10 from you. Every year I'm getting 10 from you because I can't give in that way, but I can do this. It gives people who do want to support you another way to do so. All right, that being said, I want you all to look at, in the handout that I gave you, it looks like this. I want you to look at the second page at the top where it says nonprofit funding sources, diversify for fiscal strength and sustainability. I want you to just take a minute to fill this out. Let me tell you what's there. Basically, it says, what percentage of your funding stream are you already giving to these categories? And it should come up to equal up to 100. So let's say, for instance, you say, I only use individual contributions that people give me. I do get grant funds. And well, we did sell some mugs, last year. So let's say the sales from the mugs only totaled about 10% of all the money that came in. And we got about 40% of our revenue from grants, and the other 50% came from in-kind contributions. 50, 40, 10 equals 100. That's how you come up. So that first column all the way to the left should equal, what's the pie look like for you? What percentage of what? And then to the right, what's my goal? Now that I know about all these funding streams that I just spoke about, how do I want to divide up where I get my money from? It doesn't have to be something that happens overnight. These are just goals. But eventually, if you work toward them, those goals can be reached, right? And so if you say, I want to get to the place where the individual contributions account for 25% of our revenue, we get only 20% from foundation grants, we get 5% from government grants because we want to kind of steer clear of that. That's where half our money comes from. But then we get another 20% from corporate support. We get, our earned income and revenue streams that I talked about, we get another 10% from them. And then 30% from the endowment. That's why I really want to focus my energies. Those are your goals. And then right next to goals, you have interest. This is going to be, if there's something that you put a goal for, but you don't really know anything about and you need follow-up, check off that you're interested in learning about that area so that you can follow up. You can follow up with me or you can follow up with someone else that you know. But that way you get the information that you need to start diversifying your funding sources. So you're not dependent upon one source of income or 2 or 3 sources. If one stream gets cut off, you have up to 6 other out of these 7 that you can go to, okay? And then NA just means not applicable for me. So when you're doing your 100, instead of doing it out of the 7 that are listed, you're doing it out of 6 or 5, okay? So your pie looks different. So that's why you're gonna have that NA not applicable column there. All right, moving to the next slide. We're about halfway through. I want to talk about some of the challenges that are faced by funding organizations. And I'm going to pause after so we can go back to the handout. But there are 18 different types of challenges that typically come up. I'm not going to necessarily read them all to you. You can kind of, read for yourself what's here on the screen. If you want to go back to it, it's not listed in your handout, so you're free to take a picture of it if you want. But these are the typical, all 18 types of challenges that most nonprofits face. So the question is, which of these have been your biggest funding challenge this fiscal year? Has it been not having enough cash flow to come in so that you can actually work with it? Has it been staffing and compensation? You're doing it all because you can't afford to pay someone. Has it been, managing the cybersecurity, and data that you deal with as a nonprofit? Maybe you are very tech heavy in what you do. That's a drain on your bottom line. Whatever it is for you, I want you to think about those, and then I want you to list in here the top 5 funding challenges that you have. Why are we writing those challenges down? Because you can't fix what you're not aware of that needs to be fixed. So if you take the time to write down, these are the areas that they keep coming up as pain points in my fiscal budget, but you don't have time to address them right away, this is where your board comes in. You go to your next board meeting, you say, I went to this training, it was phenomenal, I learned all this information, but there's some things that I need you as my board to do to support me in moving forward from a fiscal standpoint. We need to address these challenges. Can somebody help me or find someone that can help us address these challenges? And then there's 4 things that I want you to remember about these. The first thing is, because we all have challenges, right? That's kind of the nature of being a human being, in addition to having a business or an entity that operates like its own, a human being by itself. The first thing is that success hinges upon demonstrable differences donor funds make. Meaning, if you can show, even with these challenges, that for every $10 that I get, at least 8 of those dollars are going back to the people we serve. Only 20% of that is going to the actual staff and to all the things that have to be done. Now, most donors understand, in order to serve anyone, you have to have an operation, right? Somebody has to do the serving. And so they know that some of those dollars or some of that amount is going to come out to support the organization. But if you can show them where their dollar is helping the cause more than it's helping the organization, then they'll be more likely to give you more money. And that doesn't go just for individual donors, it goes for corporate sponsors, it goes for foundations, it goes for grants as well. People want to know that the money is going to the bottom line. Now, if you're applying for something operational, same thing. You can say the bottom line is tied to having an executive director that can have a mission and vision to keep things flowing properly, right? So that the operation actually works the way it should. In that case, you're still demonstrating an attachment to the bottom line, but you have to talk about it from a goodwill perspective, like we started off with. The second one is financial managers, so key. That's why I said they're one of the most critical positions when I talked about those basic 5. Someone to manage your finances, regardless if that's an accountant or someone who really just has a CPA, which is pretty much an accountant that has a background in managing your finances. It's critical because they're going to handle all your accounting, all your controls, and all your reporting. Without that, you don't have anything to demonstrate the differences that the donor funds made. The third one is fundraising uncertainty. Understanding that sometimes complex reporting requirements, like the evaluation requirements that a grant may offer, or your donor restrictions, they say we want you to use this money for A, B, C, but not D, E, F, that those actually can cost money because you may have to navigate doing things a different way. And so if you are aware of that up front, then you can plan for it up front, okay? That's why that's there. And the last takeaway is the integrated business systems. These are your customer relation management software, CRMs. There's all different types out there, Neon, Monday, you name them, they're out there. But they can actually streamline and enhance your financial management process. So then you only have to hire a financial manager to get you set up. And then you can manage it easily on your own. It's just maintenance, okay? All righty, let's keep it moving. All right, so I'm moving to the end of our financial piece. I'm hoping that you all are getting a lot of good, useful information so far. Can you give me a thumbs up if you're getting a lot of, oh, good, good, good. A lot of good, useful information. So I call this the 5 R's of grant writing. And if you remember, an article went out last year that I wrote that was published into a magazine here locally. I talked about these same 5 R's of grant writing. Because sometimes people will say, well, I can afford to get a grant writer for some things, big projects, but I can't afford to have somebody right at where I am as a nonprofit for everything. Or I want to be aware of what they're doing with their grant writing process so that when I'm talking to them about what their needs are as they're writing and I'm following up on the grant, I know what's going on. Well, the first R is research. You got to find the right grant, right? So you have to know your funding priorities so that you can tell your grant writer, this is what I need funding for. The tip here is focus on relevant grants that save time and effort, all right? You don't want to be out here applying for everything. Now, the average acceptance rate for grants or approval rate is 25%. That means out of 4 grants that you write, the likelihood is that you'll only get 1. My approval right now is over 80%. It's pretty high. I usually get the grant. However, that is not 100%. That means that I will not get every grant. Now, some people say, well, why should I hire a grant writer if you may not get the grant? Well, let me ask you this. Regardless of how you feel about Trump, everyone knows that even though he was convicted of 34 counts, did he hire the best attorneys he could to help get him out of that matter? Absolutely. And although he still faced those 34 counts, did those attorneys have to get paid? Absolutely. Did those attorneys do the work and show up every day in court? Absolutely. No different with a grant writer, regardless if it's me or anyone else that's writing a grant. If they are writing, they're doing the work. They're doing the research. They're putting the package together. So they're getting paid for the work that they do, regardless of the outcome. Also, just like in a legal matter, and this works well for me because I actually was an attorney before I did this. Once an attorney, always an attorney, but I bring that into my writing. However, in the place as a grant writer, for me, I'm always thinking about all the different things that can impact the decision. Sometimes when you're in court, it's the judge that you might know, or it's the prosecution that understands how if, when you're haggling the prosecution, if you get the 10 years for this and they take off of that, like how that would work for the community at large, right? Well, in the grant writing world, you have to be able to understand if they only have $200,000 that they're giving away and they're giving that to 10 different people, that means that they're trying to get somewhere around $20,000 for each package. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but that should be your target number. If the person that you're writing for says, nope, I want to go after 100,000, they got 200, I want half of that. Is that wise for you to write for 100,000? No. That's where you need to have those conversations that attorneys have with their clients when they say, I don't advise you to take the stand. It is your choice. This is your life, but I don't advise you to do it. Same with grant writing. It is your organization. If you want to pay me to write for $100,000, I certainly will. But I'm strongly advising that you go for much less, because if the goal is to get the funding, then the goal is to do what's in alignment with what the funder is looking to support, okay? And so that's why going after grants that are relevant and that you can say, I need $200,000 in grant funds. What I'll do with those that I work with is say, let's see how we can divide that up. Maybe you go after this grant for $50,000, that'll help for all your operational expenses, because you told me you had 4 areas that you need. Operational, that'll cover that. We do $25,000 for this project or program, save the whales that you're doing. That'll cover that. We'll do $75,000 for this project here. That'll cover that, and another $50,000 for your supplies and materials. We can get a grant for that from here. And then you still got your $200,000. And I would also say, instead of writing just for 4 to cover those, let's make it 8. So that you have at least 2 for each of those categories that you're going after. Because we know that you're probably not going to get all 8. But if you get at least 50%, which is higher than that 25% approval rate, right? If you get 4 of them, you still covered a large portion of what your needs were, all right? So it's a constant wheel of applying, making sure you're diversifying even in your ask. The second R is relationships. You should always be building connections. You never know who's giving out dollars for what. Sometimes resources, they'll post it for 2 or 3 days. I see grants pop up all the time in the platforms that I use. They know who they want to give the money to, right? They post it for 2 or 3 days because their foundational documents may require that, or maybe their government entity that requires that. But your proposal is better than the people they wanted to give it to. So now, they were going to give person A or organization A this funding, but now they may say, well, we're going to make A split it with you, B. And you've gotten the funding, all because you had a relationship and you were aware. So the tip here is strong relationships increase your chance of success. The third one is relevance. Make sure you've tailored your proposal to the need and to what they're looking for. You want to make sure that your project matches their focus. Use data and stories. Here's the numbers. Here's the impact of those numbers. We fed 20 people. 20 is the number. 20 people now didn't have to send their kids hungry because we gave them groceries for the week. So for 1 week, what you gave made sure that some kids didn't have to be hungry. All right? That's the story with the data. And then you want to make sure you highlight why your project stands out. No one else is making sure they give every week organic vegetables from a farming co-share, in this particular community. Maybe they're doing it everywhere else, but I'm the only one here in this area. So for people who don't have transportation, we're meeting that specific need. The tip here, tailored proposals are more likely to succeed. Resources, showcase your strengths. You want to highlight what you do well. You want to make sure you're clear about how the money is going to be used, and you want to make sure you show how the project is going to continue even after their dollars are gone, okay? The tip, be honest about your resources. It builds trust. You can say, AmeriCorps grants are written like this all the time. When I first wrote my first AmeriCorps grant, and it was for $600,000, I said, we don't have any other funding besides this. We're going after this because we need the hands to do the work and we need the dollars to support the work. But because if you give, because of your gift, we'll be able to then focus on generating other funds. The honesty is appreciated. They say, okay, we'll give you the money. What's your plan to get the other funds? Here's our plan. And once you alleviate this first year, now we have a year to work this plan. And they say, we'll give you enough for 2 years. Take your time with your plan, okay? And then the tip here, I mentioned be honest about your resources. The last one, reporting, prove impact. Sometimes this takes dollars to do, but if you track your measurements, how many people you impacted, if you meet the deadline for reporting on time, and if you're honest about your challenges and solutions, then ultimately they can say, even though you didn't hit all the goals, we saw which goals you did reach. And the ones that you had some difficulties with, if you come up with a plan for how you can go back and tackle it again, oftentimes, over 95% of the time, funders will refund a project that was not successful if there's a plan for how they can adjust. 95% of the time. That's huge. That means if you admit, hey, we didn't hit our target, but hey, we got a plan for how we can try again, that humility leads to more dollars. The tip, good reporting strengthens relationships for future funding. All right, let's keep going. So I want to talk a little bit about Hopewell Global because not a shameful plug. I'm not ashamed at all, but this is a plug. I will say that there's something that we do that's unique to any other grant grant writing organization. We do what's called the grant search report, okay? There's 3 parts to this report. Some of you all who have used my services have seen this. So the first part of the report is your objectives. This is where I spend time finding out, and this is a real one, by the way. I took a snapshot of so you can kind of see in real time what this looks like. I take the time to figure out what exactly are you looking for funding for, and then we break those down into pieces so that we can look for funding for each of those separate pieces, because usually one grant is not going to meet all of the needs, right? So we're looking for different grants for targeted needs. Here was just an example: programs for domestic violence victims, recovery initiatives for substance abuse, people who are struggling with that, assisting veterans, and then scholarships for aspiring dental professionals. The second part to that is the search results. So the search results say, and this is an example from one that I actually wrote, it says, okay, this is the category and the name of the grant. The Miami Foundation made sure that they have funding for general operating. That means for salaries, for whatever you need to keep the doors open. They gave money to give you access to health, economic stability, arts and culture, safer communities. Basically anything that a nonprofit does fell under this grant, okay? They had a pre-proposal process. The deadline was February 28th before midnight, and you could write for 3 different amounts. Or actually it was 4, I think, because if your revenue source was under $500,000, you could get up to $40,000. If it was between $500,000 to $1 million, they would give you $50,000. If it's $1 million to $5 million, they give you $60,000, and anything above $5 million, you can get $70,000 for general operating expenses. All right, so I tell you the estimated cost of what I'm going to charge you to write, so that you are not blindsided. All right. Let's say you already have written for them, you have you wrote last year, it wasn't successful, you give me that entire grant, so now I'm doing more of cleaning up, fixing, figuring out what you did wrong and making adjustments. That's gonna be lonely. But if I have to do much more, it's gonna be high end, because it's tied to your preparation time. It's tied to the hourly rate for your preparation time. So this one grant could cost you between $2,500 to $7,500 to write, all right? You may have to take a payment plan, and that's okay. But within those hours, I'm gonna be doing your organizational profile that they require, which is a lengthy process. It's not just filling in a couple of blanks. Your full proposal, and you're gonna get your documents submitted on time. Actually, you're gonna get it turned in early. I'm gonna be calling you if you don't have stuff turned in to me. I'm gonna be texting you. You're gonna get alerts from me automatically so that you know what's going on with your project, and if there's any questions or hiccups at all based on what you submitted, we're gonna address them quickly together before that document gets turned in, okay? So that's what goes into that preparation. But in addition to that, you're gonna find out what type of grant management support is needed. You're gonna find out how the likelihood of your success for getting this grant. There might be a grant that's perfect for you, but the likelihood of your success is low, and I'll tell you that and tell you why. Because I'm not gonna rule it out for you if it's good for you, but I'll say if we can fix this one thing, we can still go after it and increase it. But at least you know up front, right? That makes this unique as well. And then the next steps. Why are the next steps important? Because you may say, okay, we're halfway through 10 hours. I'm gonna pay you for 10 hours, but something has happened, and then I'm gonna try to figure out how I can handle this on my own. Or you're gonna say, I wanna kind of see what this process is and follow for myself. Sometimes clients will ask for a timeline. Very easy to do. It's based off of the next step, so you all know exactly what's happening through the process. And if you're one of those individuals that say, I really want you to write some of these grants, you've presented me with 6, can you write 3 and I do 3 myself? I'm not used to doing this, but I'm gonna take a stab at it. Every grant search report comes with a grant summary. And that means, in addition to like you have your names and categories, I tell you a brief summary about the grant. I give you all the complexities involved so that you know what you have to address. I tell you all of your actionable recommendations, meaning this is what I recommend you do when you're writing, and I give you the direct link. It's never just the name there. It's always the direct link that you can click on for yourself and go straight to the application. So if you have to write for yourself, all the information you need is there. All righty, so let's pause for a minute and turn to what's in your handout. And I want to mention to you, I brought some actual blocked out ones. If someone has more questions about the grant search report, again, it's being trademarked because it is unique to Hopewell Global. But if there's a question, I have them there so you can see them. All right, so let's go to our handout. Let's go to the section that says funding strategies. It's at where it says the percentage. I'm just gonna ask just for a little feedback. Did anybody find that what their goals were are perfectly aligned to what their percentages are? No one? Perfect. The purpose of that is to remind you that all of us are working towards some goals, okay? So everybody should have something listed in that category where it says goal and interest. Circle that. And like I said before, I'm happy to explore those areas of funding that you may not have considered before. And that is going to conclude our funding portion. I wanted to talk briefly about donor cultivation versus donor acquisition, because that's an area that I think a lot of times people are not aware of what those are. Essentially, here, got so many different papers. Essentially, your acquisition fills the buckets, okay? Your cultivation keeps the bucket from leaking. When you think about donor acquisition and donor cultivation, think of it like this. The purpose of donor acquisition is to bring in new people that you don't know. The purpose of donor cultivation is to cultivate the relationship with people you already know. So think of cultivate as grow what's already planted, and acquisition, like acquire, is buy something new and plant it. Does that make sense? And so when you're thinking about your strategies that we talked about and your different funding streams, think about who are you already connected to? What relationships can you cultivate already that you already have? Who can you ask for help already? And then donor acquisition. Who do I need to start putting myself around so I can get more new information, all right? And then lastly, I want you to be innovative about how you consider some new income strategies as a nonprofit. Regardless if it's what are you gonna sell, regardless if it's what are you gonna now charge for, whatever it is you're gonna do, I want you to be thinking about that so that you can put a plan into action as a result of this training. This here just explains the chart, and we already went through that. So I'm gonna turn us to the board development activities, just a little short. So now I wanna talk a little bit about recruiting the right people for a board. I got a couple of things here. The roles and responsibilities of board members, onboarding and engaging the board members that you have, and board member fundraising support. All right, so starting with the board member support, if you can turn to your handout again. If you look on the third page, which is your right side of it, it says board development engagement. I want you to ask yourself these 5 questions, and it's listed 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for a reason, because these questions lead to the bottom line, which is number 1. At the end of the day, the big question is, have you recruited mission-driven board members? Meaning, are these the board members that are really going to advance your nonprofit, okay? And how do you know that? Start by asking yourself, do you even meet regularly with your board? I mean, are they showing up to meetings? Ask yourself, do you provide training to your boards? You want them to do all these wonderful things, have you trained them to do it? You can't expect that they'll know what to do if you haven't told them what you need and how to do it. Did you provide written organizational documents so that if they forget what you said, they can read what it is that you want? And then, does your board members have a file or a board kit? Something that keeps things in order. Often it's put in a binder style, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about this long checklist that you see at the bottom. That's just so that you all are aware of all that goes into what a board member should have, okay? And again, these are things that the organization that I have that we provide for members that say, oh, I want to hire you to do some board stuff for me. What are you doing? Doing this whole list for you. That's what the charge is for, so that you actually have a functioning nonprofit that's compliant. Alrighty, just speaking briefly about board member recruitment and roles, I want to mention, skip ahead, I want to mention that most people don't realize board of directors are their fiduciary agent for their organization. The whole purpose of your board of directors is to provide oversight, guidance, and strategic direction to your nonprofit. They're really the lifeblood that keeps it going, okay, in addition to your staff. They play a crucial role in the governance. If the nonprofit gets sued, it's them that has to end up paying. That's why you want to have insurance for your board. In fact, Some states require board of directors to have insurance. Florida is not one of them, but I strongly encourage it. I wouldn't even join a board if you don't have some sort of insurance. It doesn't cost a lot for the insurance, but it makes sure if there's a lawsuit, I don't have to come out of my pocket, okay? The insurance provider will pay it. The responsibilities of the board are fivefold, like a hand. Number one is to do governance. That's why they should know Robert's Rules of Order. Number two is to do all your strategic planning to make sure that you have a plan for the next 5 years. It's usually 5 years, 3 to 5. Number three is your financial oversight. They need to make sure your books are in order. And if you don't have enough money coming in, they're going to be out there fundraising to get them in order. Number four is your risk management. Your risk management is going to be if things are happening like today's climate changes, where the funding gets pulled. They should be able to jump in and help you. And number five is your leadership and advocacy. They should be your number one supporter. They should be the people you can go to when things are not good. They should be the people you can go to celebrate when things are great, okay? That's what a board is there for. And in order to make sure they are able to do their job, they need some type of guidance. They need to know what you're doing so they can share with the community what you're doing. They need to know what type of marketing materials so they can pass information along. Some boards even have cards, so that they themselves can give a card to a potential donor on your behalf. You should have a board member file for every board member. Now, I have here a sample of what I've created for a few, but your board member information form should be the beginning of your file. You actually should have something called an interest form before you even get to this stage. An interest form will let you know if there's a potential conflict of interest with your board, which is a critical legal element. And then once they're on your board, you should have some type of Robert's Rules of Order. Like I said, I usually give the cheat sheet, which comes from Board Effect, because it's outstanding. It tells you things like, when do you amend a motion during your board meetings? When do you, if you have a debate during your board, who gets to end the debate? What do you say to end the debate? Most people don't know that when you have to amend a motion, there's actual words. You say, I move to amend the motion by, and then you strike and add the word. That's how things are done in order when you have a board meeting. Not just people saying whatever they want and talking over each other and throwing out ideas. That's nice, but that doesn't get the work done. There's a reason why there's an order put in place. And so these are things, like I said, that I typically will provide as a resource. But even if I don't provide them, you need them. So look online, ChatGPT. It's not going to be the same as having an actual person that can move to what your needs are, but it's something. And something for board activity is better than nothing. All right, going to the next one. I want to refer back to the checklist here, because at the very bottom where it says typical board member recruitment, onboarding, and orientation needs, you see there's 3 categories of listings for your board members. The first one is your recruitment. There's documentation and work to be done just when you're starting to look for board members. This goes back to your donor cultivation versus donor acquisition. If it's somebody you already know, it's going to be cultivation, right? And if it's somebody new, a cold call, it's going to be acquisition. You're acquiring it. That being said, regardless if you're cultivating or acquiring, they still need a position description as a board member. They still need the interest form and application. They still need a recruitment packet, and they still need something that determines whether or not there's a conflict of interest, which is usually a disclosure form, okay? Those 4 standard pieces. Now, if you want to add to that, great. But if you have these 4, that starts them off on the right foot. Now, let's say you know for sure they're interested, they filled out the application, you're going to bring them on, your board has voted and approved them to be a new board member. Now it's time to get them onboarded. The next step is to make sure that you have a commitment letter or agreement that they're going to be a board member. Because if you don't have that letter, again, going back to my lawsuit example, and something happens, they can say, I've been sitting on these board meetings, but if somebody's going to be sued and I have to pay $10,000, I'm not really a board member. And you have nothing in writing. Okay, so you want to start off with your agreement, then you want to have an official conflict of interest form, because you want to be able to prove that they're not the problem in the organization. You also have a confidentiality agreement, so that whatever proprietary information you share in your meetings stays with you. Well, stays here, why? Because we got a document that says it, that it will, right? The next thing is your code of ethics or your standards of conduct. This is more so for accounting and professionalism, accountability and professionalism, so that they know if you're going to come to board meetings, we're not going to count it as board meeting attendance if you come the last 5 minutes. You have to be here for at least 50% of the time in order for it to count as an attended board meeting. Also, you have to come to at least 75% of our board meetings to actually get credit for attendance. If you miss 3 board meetings a year, you're off the board. Like, there's standards in order to make sure you can get the work done, because you need that and deserve that as an executive director. You must have a whistleblower policy, particularly if you receive federal or state funding. That's required, which basically said if there's something going on, that they're protected if they tell the government. That's something that the government has into place. Your contact and demographic information, so that you know that you're not having a bunch of lawyers on your board, but you have some lawyers, some accountants, some social workers, maybe some people who you serve in the community, that you have a good mix. How do you know what they bring to the table? You have it on the form. And then last but not least, your media consent and photo release, okay? If you need it. Sometimes board members will say, we're all good, we don't need it, but it's always nice to have that in writing of who said that they agree to allow pictures. Pictures are so critical when you have a nonprofit. It tells a story for you. So after all that, you think, okay, I'm done. I did all my recruitment work, I got them onboarded, now they're ready to start on the board. No, you're not done. Now you have to give them an actual official orientation. Here's where you come out with your binder, or if you are tech savvy, you have all your documents on an email or in some type of file that they can easily access. And in that, everything that you see at the bottom, I'm not going to read them to you, all of that information should be on accessible in that binder or in that file that they have access to. Everything that you see there. And then everything that they have signed and agreed to needs to be in a file folder or some type of electronic folder that you keep on hand in case you need to refer to it. If you have a board member, say in your bylaws, you say you have to pay $2,500 a year, which is quite modest. Some boards go up to $5,000, $10,000 if you're large organizations. United Way, I think, is now, United Way Miami is now at $10,000 a year to be on their board. I don't know why this is from. Let's get this plugged in so this doesn't die. Okay. And that's my little signal. Thank you. Okay. So the lunch was supposed to be distributed as you came in so that you can lunch and learn at the same time. So apparently that didn't quite work as we initially planned it. However, what I want to do is, you want to bring them in? Did they all get the ticket? Get them out? Okay, great. So what we can do is I'll pause after board. We can take a very quick break. You all can get your food and we'll come back. And if you're okay with it, we'll go over maybe 15 minutes only, and that'll account for the little shift in time that we have here. And then also, if you have to leave at 1, that's quite all right. You can always follow up with me. My information is going to be here on the slide. It's also at the table there in the corner, and I can follow up with that last 15 minutes of whatever you missed. Agreed? All right, so if you all want to, if you all want to go ahead and grab your lunch when we're going to finish this last one, that'll give you a chance to eat while we finish the last portion. Go over with you all. A lot of people have problems getting board members to pay as a board member. And I don't know why this music, let's see if we, okay, that didn't work. So I'll speak up a little more over the music and we'll figure it out while you're getting the food. Basically, these are the steps for increasing financial support from board members. I did not put that in here, okay, for ease, because this is something that I actually will sit down and work through you with as one of the services. So I'm not going to give it away, but I'm giving it away essentially to you all because you can take a picture and figure it out. Set the expectation, run your board campaign. Remember I told you I would tell you the times. You start your board giving campaign in January. It takes sometimes the entire year to get the money, okay? Do not start your board campaign in August because you want to start it with the school year. Do not start it in the spring because spring has sprung and we want to encourage people. No, do not start it in the summer when most people are gone. They won't even remember. Start it in January when everybody wants to start fresh. And then you have all the way into December to collect $2,500, $1,000, whatever it is you require your board members to pay. And then that gives you time to do something that aligns with your organization, to have an event where they've paid in the beginning, now they're paying in the event, and at the end of the year, you can have some type of appreciation and gratitude banquet where they pay again, okay? So now you've got 3 distinct times scattered throughout the year. They don't feel like you're always in the pocket asking them for $1. And on top of that, you have a cycle that you can depend on for revenue coming in. Make sense? All right, and the last 3 here, use the funding strategy of give or get. Everybody won't have it, but they can get somebody that can. So if your board amount is $1,000, then maybe their get is they volunteer some of your events to bring in that $1,000. That still counts for what they gave. Maximize engagement, meaning you can have payoffs if they engage. If you say for every 10 hours you volunteer, we'll take off $100 of what you owe toward being on the board, okay? To keep them engaged, but you never make it 100%. We can do up to 9 of those 10, meaning they still have to pay 100 so that they are invested in what you do. So you're saying you sit on the board, that's $1,000, but you only get to have to pay 100 because for the rest of the time you're going to be engaged. That's still fair. You still got your 1,000 and they still have a personal investment. If you say free, even like this, we had a sponsor to cover for you all. Usually people will register or come, but their investment is not there. So you want to tie something to it. So at the end, don't get mad when I tell you the next workshop, there is a cost. We've already started working on that. But when you have the opportunities for free, if you show up and take them, then you can get more engagement more out of it. And lastly, track the donations and engagement. Many times people will track donations, but not engagement. You need both. Remember, data and a story. You have to have both. All righty, go ahead and grab your lunches. Wow, we've really filled up in here. So if I can get your undivided attention, remember, you all agreed to give me an additional 15 minutes. I'm gonna need those 15 minutes. We're gonna close out board development and jump into strategic planning and then do our closeout activities. So, just to reflect on where we left off for board development and engagement, there's just a few things that I wanted to mention about that in regard to share expenses and responsibility, providing onboarding packets and offering ongoing development. These are things that you should be doing with your board. They should be engaged at every step of the way. And so that's what that is. And as I mentioned before, you want to ask yourself or your nonprofit leader, are you doing all the things to lead to having mission-driven board members? All right? So jumping into our, am I going the wrong way here? I am. There we go. Jumping into our strategic planning in today's climate. So there's 4 things I want to talk about here. The first one is strategic plan versus nonprofit business plan. A lot of times people will say, which one should I have? I say both, and I'll tell you why. The next one is being agile and adaptive, particularly in today's climate. Collaborations and community involvement, how to increase that. And lastly, strategic thinking and crisis management, which is so relevant today. But I want to start with the first one, strategic planning versus nonprofit business plan. So the nonprofit business plan is basically what you would use for a strategic plan, all right? Typically, that's your business plan that a small business would use is your strategic plan. However, when it comes to funders and investors, a lot of the data that they need and the numbers that they need aren't always readily available in a strategic plan, especially if your strategic plan is about how you're going to reach more community versus how you're going to expand your dollars and where your dollars have been used. So in that case, you also want to have a nonprofit business plan, which is why I said both. Because if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, right? And if you have a funder or a sponsor, someone says, hey, I'd like to support what you're doing, you don't want to have to scramble and go create a plan. You want to have something in hand that maybe you just enhance so it's tailored to their needs, right? Because we want to make sure we're tapping into their need for goodwill. So a strategic plan answers the question, where are we going, why does it matter, and how do we get there, all right? Your nonprofit business plan is going to say, this is the money we need to get where we're trying to go. And what I put in your handout for you, you should have a little checklist. You look at the very back at the top, and it will tell you, this is the case where you use either of them. So when it comes to internal alignment and growth planning, you need a strategic plan. Your business plan is not going to do that. When it comes to board development or hiring, strategic plan. But when it comes to starting a new project or initiative, because there's money involved, that's where you want to have your strategic plan and your business plan for your nonprofit, all right? If you're trying to apply for large grants or investments, or you're trying to get some type of earned income or social enterprise, including selling something, as I mentioned before, all that falls under your nonprofit business plan. All right, so I want to break it down a little bit more because this is another service that I provide that I get a lot of questions about, particularly when I'm doing board retreats. When we do strategic planning as a part of the board retreats, there's a lot of questions about what goes into a strategic plan. This is the most common between the two, and it is the most essential because it covers 3 to 5 years of where you're going as an organization. You want to make sure you revisit the mission, vision, and values. In today's climate where things are changing, your mission and your vision may have to change too, and that's okay. All right? Your mission should not remain stagnant. It should change a little bit every 5 or 10 years because you should evolve with the community that you're serving. Your community needs and impact goals change, and so should your goals and impact statement. Your programs and services, what people need today, they might not need tomorrow. What we needed in the 50s, we might need something different today in 2025. So your programs and services should also fluctuate based on what the needs of the community are. Your strategic and priorities and your objectives are always going to be, what's the first priority for the people I'm serving? How can I teach the kids if they're hungry? I have to first make sure they're eating so that they can then take in what they're learning if I'm reaching youth. So those things need to be a part of it. Also your target population or populations. If you're serving more than one group of people, that's going to be your strategic plan. The numbers and demographics are shifting greatly in Miami. We used to have a large African American presence that no longer exists. So if you're going off your strategic plan from 10 years ago, your demographic target population information is outdated. You're going to need to change that. Your SWOT analysis, and I have a mini SWOT analysis for us so you can kind of see what that looks like in action, but it's basically your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, as well as your key strategies for growth and impact. This is what your board members need, because they need to know where should they be keying in terms of helping you with that growth. If there's a particular program that's really successful, that's what they need to be shopping for you to get money for, okay? Your evaluation metrics and your KPIs, which is your key performance indicators, that should be in your strategic plan. The timeline and milestones for what you plan to accomplish and when, and all your staffing, the positions, even if they're open, that needs to be a part of your strategic plan. If you're gonna say, we're gonna go from 10 to 15 staff, you need to say what those titles are and what they're gonna do. That's a part of your plan for your growth, right? Or if we're gonna go from 15 to 10, in this administration, there's not as many dollars, we're gonna have to phase out. We don't have to terminate anybody because some people are gonna leave their positions anyway when they graduate or when they do this. So as they leave their positions, we're not gonna renew that position. That needs to be a part of your strategic plan, and it includes your partnerships and the capacity that you have to actually build and grow. All right, so that's what goes into it. Someone pays me to do a strategic plan, I'm asking questions, I'm doing research. This is what I'm creating, a whole packet for you that has all of this information. For your business plan, it's gonna be a little different because this is the 3 times that you need them are usually when you're writing a grant proposal, particularly the large ones. And the government ones, like National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, they need solid numbers. You're gonna need a business plan as well as your strategic plan. Launching new programs, I told you why, because you're gonna need money to do that, but also social enterprises or earned income initiatives like your sales. If you're connecting like the humanities grant with doing your coffee table example I gave you, you're gonna need a business plan to accompany that. Now, business plans for nonprofits don't include as much as the strategic plan, as you can see here, but all of these elements are key. I mean, they are critical to making sure you have a solid plan. People aren't reading 10, 15, 20-page documents anymore. So in addition to being solid with what you're providing, you have to also know how to give it in a very concise way, all right? So I may come back to you with 5 pages or 3 pages, but you bet at your bottom dollar, every last one of these things are gonna be in there, and it's gonna hit it and quit it in a way that's engaging, that you'll know the information you need, so that we don't lose the audience in 20 pages. All right, so you're gonna have your executive summary, which is usually gonna be definitely not more than 2 paragraphs, but generally 1. Your service descriptions for all of the services you're providing or programs, your market needs analysis, which require research that a lot of times people don't have the time to do, but needs to be done. Your operation plan from A to Z, it's kind of like your flow chart. Who does what when? Who's answering the phones? If somebody wants to give money, where does that go to? Who's taking the checks to the bank? Who's following up with a letter for the 501c3 IRS compliance and a thank you, which is more important even than that 501c3. If they get a thank you and not the 501c3, they'll call you at tax time. If they get the 501c3 and not a thank you, you may not hear from them ever again, okay? All right, revenue streams, all of your revenue streams should be in there. And I just listed 4 just to give you an idea, but remember there's 7 groups and each group has several in them. your marketing and outreach plan, which includes your social media, but also your word of mouth. Financial projections and budgets, sustainability plan, which takes a lot of time, and then last but not least, your risk management, which right now, even if you go for a loan, banks are asking you about risk management plans, because in this market for nonprofits, with funding being pooled, they want to make sure that their dollars are going to be secure, all right? So that breaks down the two. Now, these are rubber bands if you don't know what that is. It's supposed to go with being agile and adaptive because we all have to stretch, right? All right, so in today's climate, I want to talk a little bit about how to adapt and thrive amid the political and financial uncertainties that we're all facing. And I have a handout that I'm going to just talk a little bit from. As you see, I have lots of different documents because I don't want to leave anything out that's really critical to advancing your personal mission. So I'm going to talk a little bit from here, but I do want to say, in order to address these things that I'm going to talk about, I really boiled it down to 3 things that you can do to help yourself adapt and thrive in this climate. The first thing is navigate the implications of a changing federal landscape. That means reducing where you lean on money and from the federal government, and increasing where you get donations or increasing where you get sponsorships. Start writing those letters. Shift your priorities. Nobody should be duplicating services unnecessarily. Why do we need 200 backpack giveaways in our community? Instead of you giving away 100 and you giving away 50 and you giving away 10, how about we all come together and give away 1,000? Make sense? That's how we shift our priorities. Use SMART goals to align community needs and funding trends, okay? And be prepared with scenario planning and risk management, meaning for every revenue source you have, ask yourself, if I lose this, what am I gonna do? If I lose this grant, where do we go? If you lose these donations, if this person here stops giving us money, who can we depend on next? Once you ask yourself for all of those funding streams, that will help you start building your risk management plan. Because that's the question I'm gonna ask. If you say, I need you to put together a risk management plan for me, I'm gonna say, okay, I need to see where all your funds come from. I need to see your donor base, because I'm gonna group your donors by individual, corporate, organizations, and even your individuals I'm gonna group by, are they long-term gifters? Are they one-time gifters? Are they gifters for events? All that's gonna matter, because then I can ask the question, if you stop this event, you're gonna lose these dollars, how are you gonna make up those funds? If you lose these 2 board members that are critical, how are you gonna get these tasks accomplished? If these 5 volunteers that tend to show up every time when you have a need for 20, what are you gonna do to get some other people? Do you have other sources in place? And guess what? There are sources for all of that, even if you can't think of them in right in that specific time. I know there's colleges right now, and I know because they are emailing me on a regular basis saying, do you have a need for volunteers? Miami-Dade County Public Schools pays their students from their budget every year to place them with organizations to do work so they have experience when they graduate from high school. And they never have enough placements every year. Every year we have at least 50 to 100 kids that go without a job that's paid from somebody else. You're not even paying them. You're just providing the work for them. They just need a place for them to go. Now, it requires you to meet with them every once in a while. They just can't be there by themselves. And it requires you to kind of keep track of their hours so that they can make sure that they're getting paid for the service they provide. And at the end, there's a very easy, probably the easiest job evaluation I've ever seen that you have to do at the very end. But for those 3 little tasks, for what you get, and they pay them like $2,500 for the summer, they're there for 8 to 10 weeks. Not a bad deal, right? Free labor. But also, it's an amazing opportunity to mentor. And every time we give, we open it up so that we can receive, right? It's a great way to do it without a high risk. So, 2 questions I want you to ask yourself after I read a couple things. I narrowed down after going through some of what's happening, and I try to stay cutting edge with what's going on right now as far as our government is concerned, as it relates to nonprofits and small businesses. And that's just the lawyer in me, right? But there's 5 takeaways that I took that I wanted to share with you all today. The first thing is, and you'll see this again later in the slideshow, but I wanted to talk about each of these briefly. The crisis is political and it is immediate. That means that federal funding is at risk. The legality of the situation is evolving, meaning we don't even know what the outcomes are going to be, and public policy is being used to threaten nonprofit status. It is what it is. You cannot address anything that you're not aware of. So that's what's happening. If you said, I don't know, I heard this, I heard that, that's the bottom line, what's happening right now when it comes to nonprofits. What can nonprofits do? Well, we have to be proactive, not reactive. We kind of have to go play to where the ball is going, not to where it's at right now. If in soccer they're trying to get it in the net, then you need to go to where the net is to protect that, to get it over to your side. Not the ball is coming dribbling at me because he's dribbling at you so he can get it to the goal, right? So go to where the goal is. You know the ball is going to make it there because that's what they're trying to get it to, right? So we need to play to where the ball is going. First, prepare before the crisis hits you. Yes, we have a crisis going on, but nothing has particularly may not have hit you. There are some nonprofits that have had to pull funding, but if you're not one of them, then this is your chance to work on that now before you become one of them, right? Know your funding vulnerabilities. Know where your shortfalls are so you can start beefing those up and secure your infrastructure. That is so key. You have to understand how interruptions to funding or to staffing are going to impact your daily operations, okay? And your compliance. Because if you aren't compliant, then you can't operate, even if you have people and money to do it. The next thing is going to be your community and advocacy. That's your armor. There's strength in numbers. So because we know there's strength in numbers, in a politically manufactured crisis, which this is, building alliances provide protection because you have a voice. I've had a conversation with someone about what's happening at Harvard. And one of the things that I keep hearing from NPR to different news outlets, but even thinking about myself is, if Harvard, who is positioned to actually do something, does nothing, what happens to the people who aren't positioned? But if you're linked to them, now you see what's happening? All the universities are coming together. They're really competitors of each other. But in a crisis, coming together gives them strength to fight the issue. That's what you have to do as nonprofits. That's why these kind of trainings are so important. So at the end, when we actually have our come together time, you'll have a chance to actually network and build and strengthen your armor. The next thing is build an advocates board or an advisory council. What that does is it gives you a funnel for your board of directors if somebody does leave, but it also gives you another think tank to generate leads, funds, et cetera, what you need for your business. So you have your board, but you also have an advisory council. And that doesn't have to be the same people that's on your board that does your accounting and your numbers and your legalities. That could be friends, family members that say, I don't want to get on your board anyway. Well, I got an advisory, now you can come join me there. Because they have great ideas and they know people. And when people know people that know people, they grow your nonprofit. That's how you get support. And last but not least, activate your base. Some people who might be a part of what you're doing or giving money, they just don't know what's going on and how what's happening today is affecting you. So you gotta tell your story. You gotta let people know, hey, this new funding cut may not have hit me yet, but if we lose dollars in 3 categories, we're gonna have to close the doors. Help us keep our doors open. And whatever you get for that, you may not need right now, but keep that cushion. Now might be the time to start thinking about that endowment that I talked about. The fourth thing is to diversify and strengthen your funding portfolio. It goes back to remember I said the first thing we're gonna talk about is the money, those 7 different categories. Look at those goals that you wrote down. Look at those checklists and the interest and follow up. That's the number one thing we struggle with as nonprofits because we have so much to do day to day. We miss the follow-up. Even if you set a goal, put it on your calendar, that you have 3 things listed there, follow up 1 next month, 1 for June, 1 for July. And then you followed up on all 3. And for me, I meet a lot of people. If you say, hey, I'm such and such from this training, okay, great. It's July, I'm just not getting to this thing, so be it. But at least you followed up so that you're doing something about it. Use the momentum to be innovative. Challenges bring opportunities. It's kind of like when you have a conflict. Conflict for what's wrong helps you figure out what can be right and how to make it right and how to make things better. So take these things that are happening that have created challenges as an opportunity to do something innovative and new that might even bring you more than what you were getting before. And lastly, leverage tools like Google Ads grants. They give up to $10,000 a month in free ad space that can help you with your visibility and your donor traffic, to increase your funds. That's free. And it's not like a grant where you don't get it. Everybody who applies for it gets it. So, it's valuable, a valuable resource to get your name out there, all right? Last but not least, stay centered in mission and values, even if you have to adjust your mission and values, okay? Because your mission and values should really speak to who you're serving and not just what you think is a great idea or is pretty. I mean, that's nice, but you can start a small business and do that. For a nonprofit, you're there to serve the community. So how does the community need to be served? And how, based on what you do, can you do it better for them, all right? So you're gonna have to double down on your transparency and trust. Be honest with the people that you're saving. You're gonna have to keep serving creatively, and you're gonna have to practice strategic partnerships so that we don't have 200 backpack giveaways, but we have maybe 2 or 3 at different dates. So if you can't go to this date, you can go to that one or this one, but that's it, okay? We're working together, absolutely. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about collaborations and community involvement. Basically, you want to leverage the partnerships by stop unnecessary duplication, as I mentioned. Ask people for what they need and not giving them what you want, what you think they need. Look for ways to partner, collaborate, and then consider local and national case studies. I have one listed here. I'm not going to go into all of this because time is of the essence right now, but I do want to focus on Catalyst Miami because they actually did lose funding at one point, and we know they're a huge organization in Miami. Basically, the context is they're focused on economic justice and health equity. They had some shifts in funding that were huge, okay, due to changes in the local government here in Miami. And then there were some national cuts to the poverty reduction program that the previous administration used to sponsor. So what they did is they used a participatory strategic plan and hosted some community-led town halls, several of them. And then in doing those town hall meetings, the people who gave them ideas from the meetings, they actually engaged those individuals, and they were able to come up with a way to still meet the economic hardships of those that they serve with the people in the audience that didn't even know how they can be engaged. And by doing that, they shifted from purely a service-based model to include grassroots advocacy and training, something that they hadn't been doing before, and then they added a policy influence because that came out of the town hall meetings. So now they were tapped into lobbyists who normally they wouldn't have, that were interested in having them join their initiatives for free to advance the mission. The outcome, this community-centered approach helped them get secure multi-year funding from the Kellogg Foundation. I mean, multi-million-dollar grant that they received. The Kellogg Foundation went to them. They didn't even have to seek them out as a result of this. They were able to raise unrestricted dollars. Remember I talked about unrestricted? Can spend them on whatever they want from new donor circles as a result of this. And they were also able to increase their visibility and policy advocacy and successfully influence local legislators legislation related to housing and income inequality. All of this great stuff came out of something that didn't feel good, because they were honest. And they start having town halls saying, we don't want to close Catalyst Miami. We help a lot of people. You all tell us what we should be doing. How can you help? That made them very vulnerable as a nonprofit because they were considered one of the experts. But asking for help doesn't make you less of an expert. Doing something for 10,000 hours or more makes you an expert. And even the experts need experts. Doctors don't operate on themselves, right? All right, so I'm going to pause there. I was going to give you a national one, but this is more local to the community, so I'll stop there. As far as strategic thinking, this is the SWOT I was telling you about. Strategic thinking is about seeing the big picture, okay? Identifying patterns and connections and using insight to make intentional, future-focused decisions that align with your long-term goals, all right? When we think about strategic thinking, think of it as 3 things. You have a vision, you act on that vision, and it makes an impact. That's all strategic thinking is. Vision, action, impact. And when you break it down to a SWOT analysis, the strength is, what is your organization good at? Simple question. Where do we need the most support? How can we help somebody else and somebody else help us? That's your opportunity. And your threat, what are current risks that we face and the potential risks that we gotta plan for? That's simple. And that goes back to what I was saying about at the beginning, the 2 questions that you can ask, that I wanted you to ask yourself, which are here on the bottom of in the midsection of your last page. Ask yourself, what social, political, or economic changes are affecting your funding now? It could even be potential for. And then what would your organization do if it lost 30% of its funding overnight? What would you do? Now, if you haven't had that happen, This is the time to figure out what you do, not after it happens. That's where it gets challenging, okay? So I just want to mention before we close out with the last of this, for crisis management, remember the best time to prepare is before it happens. Stay proactive and connected. These are the 5 takeaways that I read to you all that I was kind of talking about regarding today's climate, about the crisis and being proactive. These are things that we can do to basically combat what's happening. And just to reflect, ask yourself if you need a strategic plan or a business plan. Like I said, I say both. Are you prepared to pivot quickly if there is a crisis? And should you partner or collaborate? And what's the difference? Again, I say both. And so I'm going to tell you briefly, when it comes to collaboration and to partnerships, essentially it comes down to this. When you are talking, and I think I put that in your notes, your handouts also. Oh, what did I do with it? Yes, I did. When you look at partnership versus collaboration, it's there on the very back. Think about what you need each one for. And that's why I said again both. If it's a formal interaction, you're going to need a partnership. That's where you have contracts and MOUs. But if it's informal, it could be kind of a verbal, okay, we're going to work together. That's a collaboration. And if you have more questions about the commitment level, what resources you're sharing, what's the risk or reward or an example, I put that right there for you because all of us should be partnering and collaborating. But if you want to know when do I do which, it's right there for you. All right, tools and resources before I say my thank yous for you all being here today. For grants, I want to encourage you to go to Grant Watch. Instrumental, I put referred because the fee is $500 a month for their big to-do, the whistles and bells, which is really worth it. That's one of the ones that I use for my organization, but I write grants all the time, so I kind of have to have that. But if you want to go with them, I can refer you and they'll take a percentage off. That'll kind of help with the cost. They do have a $199 package right now going on, but it can be brought down if you get a referral. SAM.gov is still very helpful in terms of some contracts that you can get from the federal government as a nonprofit. Grants.gov is not in bold because, as I mentioned to you all, that's where the federal government has tapped in. And as of right now, DOGE has taken over. There's not been anything put out formally, but they have sent out notices to the individuals who are heads of departments that post, saying that they are no longer allowed to post for themselves. The postings have to go to DOGE and then be approved before they can post anything. So I would kind of steer clear. You can still look at grants.gov, but just know that there's involvement there. For your board members, there are so many organizations that can help you with board development. If I do a one-on-one follow-up with you, I can connect you to, I know 20 right off that I can give you, that I can say, but you want to use these 3. They definitely will help you for your nonprofit. And then for strategic partnership and local support, you can go, like I said, myself, the Miami Foundation provides it, United Way, Leadership Miami, there's a whole plethora. This is a great screen to take a picture of. These are just some tools and resources to help you. So I'll pause to give you a second to take a picture of that. Just wanted to talk very briefly about another resource that I provide. So Hopewell Global, you know, we provide contract and grant proposal writing, board development, strategic planning, and workshops. This book here, Good to Great, which is part of why I named it that, this series, is outstanding. It's focused on small business ownership. But if you run your nonprofit like a small business, boy, you will have a powerful nonprofit. And then this one here is a more biblically based book, but I just wanted you all to kind of see that making sure you're staying up on your reading, which is kind of hard when you're also doing everything else, but if you give yourself like, I'm gonna read for 10 minutes a day, just 10 minutes. I'm gonna read something that's not the news. Then that'll help you get through those kind of resources. Also, I'm doing some community outreach, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. I kept hearing from people saying, it's hard for nonprofits, it's getting harder. Yes, it is. Help is out here. There's a lot of us out here that want to make a difference and not just make a dollar. Making a dollar is nice, you can't live without it, but making a difference is better because it increases the dollar that you get in other ways. So we're going to talk about 3 things that I'm doing. Number 1, I'm going to do another training in May. It says to be announced because I have to pick up the date. It's going to be on a Friday here at Center for Black Innovation, and it's going to be an access and answers. That's access to me and answers. So I can't answer every question right now, but if you think about it after a couple of weeks, some questions that come up as you start putting this stuff into practice, come back and I'll be able to answer the questions then. The next one is also I'm doing Hopewell Lead, which stands for Leadership, Engagement, Advancement, and Development. It's going to be a membership. It is a membership program. It's $250 a month, but with that, there's so much that you get. I'll tell you briefly the membership benefits, and there's quite a few. Peer support cohort will meet monthly. I'll be able to invite people. For instance, one of the questions I got during the break was about some of the tax implications involved for certain types of sales that are engaged, or having a lobbyist. I can actually bring someone, I know quite a few of those people that can come and actually answer the questions that you have and provide what you would otherwise have to pay $6.50, $5, whatever an hour to a professional. You'll have access to free for that as part of those monthly meetings. Also, access to funder focused workshops. If I'm writing grants for certain funders on a regular basis, like I know there's some that I write grants for all the time, I can call them and say, hey, can you come talk to this group, this small cohort that I have about what you're looking for in your grants, how much, any questions they have, and then when you write, they'll look for your application. So it increases your chances. Board recruitment pipeline and tools, those tools that I shared with you all, you'll have access to all that for free. You would have to pay for that. Really, the membership pays for itself. I mean, it's as low as I could make it to be able to give back. The board member onboarding support with all those forms, I would also give you those so you could have some of that support with that. Grant search highlights, I will do 2 every month so that you know, targeted, not just when you go to a platform and find grants. No, these 2 grants will be good for you in particular. So you won't get like the full, all the bells and whistles, but you'll know these are 2 that I should go for, and it'll be the grant search report format. And then board member advisement network, I'll have a pool of board members who are willing to go and serve on your boards, but also that'll they don't have that high level commitment where they can go to monthly meetings or quarterly meetings, but they can be assessed for questions that you might have. For instance, a couple of them are individuals who are law firm partners. And so if you have a question that's a legal question, who better to ask than a law firm partner that you have access that would serve on your board, but they don't have the time to come to meetings, but they can still be asked questions. They can still provide guidance. So you'll have that. And then the big one to me is the 50% discount for a shared annual board retreat, which is only going to be for those members. So I'm doing this for up to 12. My target is 10. So if I have 10 nonprofits that want to do all these things, like I said, it's $250 a month to kind of offset some of the costs. But you'll have access to all of that, and then once a year, instead of you having to put on your own board retreat to do your strategic planning and all the stuff that you have to do at a board retreat, you come to the shared board retreat. We have kind of like a plenary session at the beginning where all of us kind of together, that partnership opportunity, and then each group will go off to their own silo to deal with their personal nonprofit business. So, and it cuts the cost down, because now we're sharing the cost of food that you would have to provide at a board retreat, the cost of everything involved, securing the venue, all of that. All that is coming out of that little $250 you're paying a month. Portion of that is going to make sure I secure a nice venue so you can do all these things. So it steps up your game at a lower cost. So that is the Hopewell Lead initiative. And last but not least, I'm doing a nonprofit and a small business that's going to be called Stages and Phases, Overcoming Challenges, Embracing Opportunities. One for nonprofits, one for small businesses. It's going to be a 10-part series. It begins in August and ends in May. All right? And that 10-part series is going to go through all the stages that you would go through and what you need to do in those stages. If you don't have it or you can't do it, how you can get the resources to do it. And I always focus on what is free or low cost first, because we have a lot of expenses already, and I don't want to add to that if possible. Alrighty, so partnership begins today. We're about out of time. I'm going to give you a chance to do a little reflection. I wanted to give you 10 minutes, but I'm going to skip forward beforehand for those who may have to leave. I wanted to end with 2 quotes that I love from 2 women that I love. Maya Angelou, who is no longer with us, but definitely someone that I have read a plethora of her work. Do the best you can until you know better. That's what we do, right? And then when you know better, do better. And if you're not doing better, it tells me you don't really know better, all right? So this underscores the importance of growing, learning, and transforming. Michelle Obama's quote, "You may not always have a comfortable life." Most of us in the nonprofit world don't. And you will not always be able to solve all the world's problems at one time. But don't ever underestimate the importance you can have, because history's shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own, okay? All right, when I think about her husband, I think about he just had a little bit of hope. It took us a long way, right? So, and then if you have to leave, I want you to remember you're not alone. Use what you've learned. Together we can go from good to great, and I want to stay connected to you. So thank you. I will go back to the slide for the partnership for those who do want to stay for that one last activity. And then that will conclude our time. I know you wanted to say something before. One of our nonprofit guys here is running for a political office, so I told him I'd give him a second. Just a minute.
Just a quick second. Kiki. It's a quick sec. So my name's first off, Brother Ivory Gray. I'm the CEO of Encouraging Dreamers, Breaking Barriers. It's a second chance escape program where we work with troubled youth and youth before they get in trouble, and we pay them $15 an hour to wash cars. It's one of my initiatives that I have going on for the last couple of years. It's like an eye candy that I use to be able to mentor the youth and teach them different tools that we need. But the reason I'm standing in front of you guys today is I'm stepping up to the challenge, like she just said, like Obama did. I'm giving us hope and an opportunity to change the narrative. I might not look like your average politician because I'm not, you know what I mean? But I represent you guys. So I'm stepping up to the challenge to become the first ever African-American mayor of the city of Miami in 130 years. I've been here, born and raised in this community, in Coconut Grove, the oldest black community, and I've been able to experience a lot of different things that the city has been able to offer me. You know, I lost my whole 20s being incarcerated. I was also homeless in 2017 is when I actually found myself, and I found out the greatest gift that I have is to just be alive and free, and how can I impact others? So being at Chapman Partnership, I learned a lot of things, a lot of tools that will help me to empower our community by creating that togetherness that I believe that we need. You will not have your average politician that would come up here and sell you dreams and lies about things that I can't do, because that's not me. I will be here to bring your issues and your concerns back to the city, because I believe that creating a government where the people come first is where we're going to have a government of success. So my main focus is on economic development and youth empowerment. So I plan on believing that if you empower the youth by creating job opportunities for them, that creates a safer community. So if we have youth that's working and police presence, we'll have a safer community for us all. So I have a lot much more, but I just want to introduce myself and let you guys know that you will see a lot more of me. I think they left some flyers downstairs, and I just thank y'all and hope that you guys really accept the challenge to say, what if? What if we could put ourselves in position? What if we could make a difference? Because everybody else put themselves in position, and we've been out of position forever. So how do we get in position? This is our opportunity of a lifetime. Like I say, I'm not the average politician. I'm not the people that's gonna come up here and sell dreams to you, but I feel everything you feel. I'm a grassroots organization. I'm scrambling and scrambling just like y'all. But I know if we all work together, we can do something that hasn't been done. You know what I mean? So I like to leave this. Power of the people, greater than the people in power. They say unity is more powerful than atomic bomb. Last one, we'll stand for something, or we're gonna continue to fall for anything. So this is a great initiative, 5 Shades of Gray, where I'll be flipping over all 5 districts. And we just want to say city pride. Love y'all, y'all have a blessed.
Thank you. And I can tell you, even with my legal background, Mr. Ijeman Gray has been to Tallahassee and met with legislators more than I have. So he is definitely connected in the way to actually make this thing happen. So thank you. All right, if you all want to take a quick picture, did you get your pictures of that? All right, I'm gonna, as you leave, I'm gonna leave it on this slide here. If you want to introduce yourself to someone, and the little thing that I came up with, since music is universal, if your nonprofit was a song, what would it be and why? So when you talk to the person, you can tell that person that. But I want you to really think about an idea that you want to take back and implement. Obviously, we don't have time for you all to share, but I just want to see if you can play. I had the Jeopardy music where it's embedded, where if you hit it, it plays the doo-doo for the 10 minutes. So I want you to talk to each other as we're going out the door, network, get numbers, and see how you can partner, collaborate, and have a wonderful Good Friday. Thank you.